Hey guys, Art17 here, and this is the second video for week one. Typically there'll be two videos that I make each week and then instructional videos as well. And for assignment number two, as you see, week one, assignment two, we are doing an assignment that's called Shoe from Memory and Shoe from Life. So the one from life is something you're actually looking at, one of your shoes or a boot that you're going to drop right in front of you. And I say it's best to use a single light source. So if you're going to use the window and light from outside, sit next to the window and have only that light shining in on your subject. And so this creates a light side and a dark side to your subject, which now when you draw it, you're putting in all that contrast in those tones. You get a good shape out of your subject when you're putting it down with graphite on a two-dimensional sphere, plane. Anyway, and the homework is the drawing of choice. So that's pretty much open with some guidelines that I will say about that. Drawing of choice, any drawing you're doing should have shading. So big part of this course is shading. You'll see that over and over and over. And we're working on shading because that also proportion, but shading brings out the contrast which creates shape. Without that, it's just going to be flat. I'll show you some drawings of shoes, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the shading is what you're looking at anything. You'll start noticing that there's light and dark parts to it because of the light that's shining on it. So you want to be very conscious of your light source. And I say use a single light source so that you're not lighting up the whole entire object, and there's no dark and light side to it. It's very hard to get a shape out of that as opposed to the single light source. So, and also look for the two videos I'm going to provide, actually three. One will be on shading. One will be on how to position your hand with the pencil and different ways to hold the pencil to shade. And the other one will be on gesture drawing objects, which is just a very quick sketch to get the proportions correct and mapping out basically where you are going to put your subject on the paper. Rather than trying to draw it perfectly from scratch, you do a gesture drawing and very lightly, and it will map out the form, the proportions, and where you want it placed on the paper. And then when you're happy with that, you can start using that as a template to start finalizing your details and all the shading and get more intricate about your drawing at that point. But first you do a gesture drawing. So look for those three videos before you start this assignment number two, or the drawing of choice. Okay, so let's go into shoe drawings. Okay, so one's from memory, which is going to be, it's kind of like imagination as well. You know, something from your imagination, or it's a shoe that you remember, but you're not looking at. You're going to draw it from your mind. That's the shoe from memory. The shoe from life is actually putting one of your shoes on the table in front of you with a single light source. And I want to see that represented. Where's your single light source? You know, it's going to have a cast shadow on the table and everything else. It's going to have a light side and a dark side to everything. Shoelaces, whatever. It's going to all reflect what your light source is doing to that subject and how you're going to perceive it and put it down on a paper with graphite. And that's basically using tones, several levels of tones, like 7 of them, from light to dark. Not just one tone or a mid-tone or 2 tones, 7 tones. All right, so If you see, some of these drawings do not have any shading, like this one, and they look very flat. There's no real shape. There's no 3-dimension to that shoe because it has no shading. There's no light source represented here. It's just a sketch of a shoe with lines, and that's it. Now this shoe here has plenty of shading, doesn't it? And these are the lights and darks I'm talking about. Light area going into a dark area, light area going into a dark area. Mostly, there's no lines in here. It's mostly just shades that meet up with other shades. There might be a thin line here and there, but typically there's not even a line around the whole shoe. It's just where the shade ends. And you have your background, which is lighter than the shoe, and then you have that edge. But there's no line there, if you notice. And when you're looking at your shoe or boot or whatever you're going to draw on the table, you'll notice there's not very many lines in it as well. And so don't put the lines on the paper. Work with your shading. And watch the shading video, and you'll see what I'm talking about with shading as well. And all these drawings with shading of shoes are much stronger. They have a 3-dimension to them because of the lights and darks you're putting in there with the shading. And very few lines are actually there. It's shading meeting shading. And ending here, meeting another shade here that's darker, meeting another one that's lighter, and that's where the edges or perceived lines would be, but there's really no line there. Now, yes, on the front of the shoe, they have the texture lines right there that are very predominant on this kind of shoe. So now and then lines can be useful, but mostly they're not accurate in everything. So you have to see where they really are and where they aren't. Okay, so the light's coming from this direction, probably the top left, because all on the right side of the shoes, there's the cast shadow on the table from the shadow. And cast shadow can have several different layers of tones in it, not just one. Here's a dark area here, and it gets kind of light right there, and light right there, and goes back to dark over here. And you'll notice that when you're looking at your shoe on the table with the cast shadow, because you do have a single light source. If you have multiple light sources going on and it's all lit up, you're not going to see that cast shadow very well. Well, there'll be 2 cast shadows or 3, and it's kind of confusing. So look for the cast shadow. Notice where your light source is. Do you see the shadow on the shoe from the shoelace right here? That's telling me that there's a light shining from the top right, because there's a shadow behind on the left side of that shoelace. And back here too, and right here, they're laying close to the shoe, but there still is a shadow in there. All this has to be drawn out to make a strong drawing, or it's just not going to pop off the page and speak volumes to you. Here's a boot drawing and a sandal. Both are okay, but if you're going to draw a sandal, put all that shading in. Don't just draw this sandal with nothing and it's just sort of sitting there. Like these shoes with nothing, that's not what I'm after. And you shouldn't want that either, because it's very flat. It doesn't show any shape. There's more to drawing than that, much more. This is a good drawing. And you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, they did add a little line right there, but back here there's no line. It's just the shading ends right there. And around the front of the toe where the very reflective areas here are going to be the lightest areas. But if you look at this, there's like 7 different levels of tone. From the lightest one, 1, then maybe that one, 2, then into this one, 3, and then 4, and then possibly 5, 6. Where's the darkest? Maybe right here, 7. So 7 levels of tone is what you want to look at your drawing after you get done. Count them up. Are there 7 levels of tone in here? Or is it just like 2 or 3? So you want 7, okay? All right, this is good examples on Bing or Google Images. Put shoe drawings. Always put drawings, or you're going to get photographs or paintings or something like that. And we're not painting yet. So you can get this up on your own computer and look at examples, but I want you to work from a real model in front of you, your shoe. Okay. And then the shoe from memory is one that you're imagining that you know of. Maybe you're not looking at it, okay, but you have a shoe in mind, and you're going to draw that shoe. Well, remember all you learned about shading, and you're going to do the same drawing with your imagination, okay? So it should be, fairly close to your life drawing because you're going to remember all those skills you just learned. All right. Okay. Drawing of choice. You should you should be drawing whatever you want, but keep the shading that you just learned about in mind and shade what you're drawing. Don't just leave it unshaded and flat because you want to create a three-dimensional appearance on your two-dimensional plane, which is your paper, okay? And then it pops out at you. This is a very strong drawing, a better drawing than something that's flat. All right, so that's the end for this week. Work on these and then send them to me sometime during next week. That's the way to keep up on the class projects, and the assignments won't get behind. Okay, so send them to me sometime next week, maybe toward the end of the week, because I may ask you to do more work to them for a better grade, and you always have a chance for that. When I ask you to work on them and give suggestions and examples, and you work on them and send them back, typically you're getting a better grade all the time. You may miss the point, and I have to ask you to do it again until my satisfaction. Sometimes this goes on 5 or 6 times to get a real good grade. And if you don't do it, you get the lesser grade, right? So this is no different than a face-to-face class. I'd be coming around and asking you to do this or that, giving suggestions, and you work on it, and you show me that you understand those and tried it. And then you're getting a better grade on what you would have turned in and got maybe a C on. Now you're getting a B or an A. All right. We'll talk with you later. Talk with you next week. Have a good weekend.